All right. Appreciate that, Coach Sherman. I know you're the principal. You're still the coach to me. Those are great memories, and I was just telling Ervin down here, this is going to be a little challenge for me. I've had the opportunity to speak to a lot of groups, but so many of you in this room actually know me personally, so I'm going to have to tell the truth tonight. So sometimes for me and my dad, that can be a chore right there. But no, this is really a special night, and when Ervin got on the phone and called me, you know, whenever everybody hears that you're maybe out of coaching and back in South Carolina, you know, they all start calling you to come speak. And I've had the opportunity to come speak and blessing to speak at many FCA events. And so those calls started coming in, and thank you. And, you know, I was trying to take a little bit of time just to kind of debrief after South Florida and kind of figure out what I'm going to be doing moving forward. And so I put a lot of those on pause, but whenever I got a call from the Midlands FCA, I had to say yes and said, let's do it and let's make this thing happen. And I'm going to see if I can figure this out right here. All right. Let's see if we can go right. Okay. I may need some help. All right. I like to be animated with my hands, so I need to. All right. Okay. Here we go. I got it. Let me tighten it up right here. A little Clemson engineering right there. All right, thank you. But I do, and the biggest thing tonight, I don't want to make this about me, because it's not about me, right? And the reason we're here is to be able to celebrate and you know, our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, and really bring people together that can help support the ministry of FCA. So that other people, I mean, I just got amazed hearing how many schools and groups there are in this Midlands area, right? 83 high schools, 83 middle schools, so many people in colleges, so many people, coaches and students to be impacted. And, you know, it's a great honor. And, you know, I want to say, you know, going back, I used to tell the story about me being at Blythewood. I was a young coach, and I've told that story so long. Now I'm a lot older. That was like almost 17, 18 years ago. And so it's gone a long, long time. But my star quarterback at Blythewood was a guy named Richard Mounts. Richard's here, right here. And Richard still to this day is one of the best quarterbacks that I've ever coached. And that's including some pretty good guys that I coached there at Clemson. But Richard and I have stayed close through the years, and you know, we have a lot of things in common. And, you know, one thing that we have in common is we both like to turkey hunt, right? And anybody that goes turkey hunting knows it's April. We're kind of in that turkey hunting season. And so about 3 weeks ago, you know, Richard came up to Clemson where I am and spent the night with me. And he wanted to go turkey hunting on the opening day. April 1st, opening day of turkey hunting season. So here I am. I'm not coaching. I got time to go hunt a little bit. So he came up to the upstate, and we got up that next morning about 5 a.m. and drove down to Anderson County. There's a big Clemson booster named Mr. Jeffcoat that owns a bunch of land down there, and he's let us hunt on his property for many, many years. Me and my dad kind of slip out there every once in a while. And so we're driving down there. It's about to get daylight, and we pull up there at Mr. Jeffcoat's property there in Anderson County. And I'll tell Richard, just stay in the truck. I'm going to go let Mr. Jeffcoat know that we're here, and then we'll go right on back and hunt. So I went up, knocked on the door. Mr. Jeffcoat came there, and I said, you know, good morning. I said, you know, I brought one of my former players here from back at Blythewood, and we'd like to go turkey hunting back there if that's all right. He said, absolutely. Y'all have a big time. I've been hearing those gobblers back there the last few mornings, so I think you guys are in for a treat. I like to hear that. I said, well, thank you. And I shook his hand and turned to walk away, and I got about 3 steps away from the door, and he said, Coach Scott. I said, yes, sir. He said, I got a favor to ask. Well, I get a lot of those. So I said, yes, sir, what is it? He said, well, it's about my old mule, Betsy. He said, you know, Betsy, man, I've had Betsy for going on 15 years now. She's a great mule. She's done a lot for me on the farm here, but unfortunately, Betsy's come across some bad times. Betsy broke her right foot last week. She's gone blind in her left eye, and she's not going to make it. She needs to get put down, and I'm trying to figure out, how does this have anything to do with me? And so about that time, he came on out and said, you know, the vet said it's going to cost $1,500 for them to come out and put Betsy down. And, I got some men from the church going to come out later this morning and dig a hole for me. And so if you don't mind, before you guys go back there and go hunting, if you just take care of old Betsy for me. And I'm like, what do you say to that? So, my dad taught me anytime an elderly person asks you to do something, what do you say? Yes, sir. So I turned back around and I could tell, and I turned back and I could see Richard's kind of getting a little anxious, there in the truck, kind of what's going on. So, I've been known to have a little fun. So I got back in the truck and Richard said, is everything okay? I said, no, it's not. He said, what's wrong? I said, well, apparently, Mr. Jeffcoat just told me he did not appreciate the way that I left Clemson and went down to South Florida 3 years ago, and that me and my friends are no longer have permission to hunt on his property. And Richard said, well, I guess we need to go home. I said, heck no, we're not going home. I'm not letting anybody treat us like that. Said, you've driven up all the way from Columbia yesterday. We're going turkey hunting. So I jumped in, and I just took off going down the gravel road back there. Richard's kind of holding on, trying to figure out what's going to go on. And so sure enough, I see right there at the barn, there's old Betsy. She's just barely hanging on right there. And so I pull up, and I get out, get my shotgun out, and put it right there on her, and bang, Betsy goes down. And I turn to look and see Richard's reaction, and I hear another bang, bang. Richard comes running around the other side of the truck and said, hurry up, let's go. I shot 2 of his cows too. So now y'all know why they have me sitting next to Sheriff Leon Lott tonight, right here, escorting me in and out. So you got to be careful right there. But FCA is truly been a huge part of my life as a very young kid, and then as a young athlete, a high school athlete, a college athlete. I was really the holder at Clemson, so I don't know if that qualifies or not, but a young high school coach and then a college coach. And I tell people this all the time. I really feel like I was kind of born right into FCA. And I don't know if any of y'all have seen this picture before right here. I want them to put this one picture up. This picture that FCA has had for many years is actually a painting called Influence. That's the title of it, Influence. And I looked it up. And this is a painting that was painted by Arch Unroe from an actual picture that Coach Ray Dean, who was a high school coach in Georgia, took many years ago of his son, David Dean, overlooking an FCA huddle meeting going on at the FCA boys camp in Black Mountain, North Carolina, right? And, I've seen that picture for years. And then if you go to the next picture, right? This was actually me, all right, on my dad's shoulders, right, in about 1984 at FCA Boys Camp at Black Mountain, right there. And thank goodness those bike shorts were not in trend whenever I started coaching that my dad's wearing right there, so you got to kind of forgive that. But that literally is my first memory. I see Andy Heen back here, Earl Humes. That was my first memory right there as a young kid. I'm probably 4 years old right there. Of here I am at FCA camp watching these huddles, right? Watching these huddles. And, there's a poem that's been associated with FCA in the past. Somebody wrote it called To Any Athlete. And it says, there's a wide-eyed little fella who believes you're always right, and his ears are always open, and he watches day and night. You are setting an example every day in all you do for the little boy who's waiting to grow up and be just like you. So that's literally me as a young kid and being able to watch that. And man, how fortunate was I as a young kid as my dad was coaching at Florida State for Bobby Bowden. So being from 3 years old to 13, running through that locker room and on the practice fields every day after school and being able to watch a guy like Bobby Bowden, right, sit there and mentor his players. And so I was around a program as a very young age where FCA was a very big part of that. And, I think FCA does a great job of combining two things that I'm very passionate about. Number one is our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. And number two is sports. Right, what a great combination. And, for me personally, I accepted Christ into my life whenever I was 11 years old. We were living in Tallahassee. I was actually baptized by my pastor, John Rickenbacker, He's now actually an area director in Myrtle Beach for FCA. But even though I accepted Christ at 11 years old, growing up in a Christian home, being very fortunate with the parents that I had, it was really probably in high school that I really kind of, my faith got tested, right? You kind of in that 9th, 10th grade trying to figure it all out. And I got to be careful because I got Ann Reynolds over here that went to high school with me, so I have to be careful with my stories that I tell. But that was a trying time, right, where I'm trying to figure out what I'm doing on Friday night and Saturday. Is that the same thing of who I am on Sunday, right? And where does that fall in my faith and who I am and the decisions that I want to be? And fortunately, right, Hammond had an FCA, and I got more involved in the FCA there at Hammond in my junior and senior of high school, and that was really important to me to kind of get my North Star back. And so even as a student athlete going through that, FCA really helped provide those services for me. And then, I can remember when my dad got fired at South Carolina. It was my senior year of high school, right? And here I am, 17, 18 years old, and my dad's been very successful at Florida State as the offensive coordinator, won a national championship, comes to South Carolina. First year had a good season, went 7-5, won the first bowl game in the history of the program. And the president was in the locker room after the game saying, as long as I'm the president of University of South Carolina, Brad Scott will be our head coach, right? Well, what happens in college athletics? 5 years later, he's fired because he didn't win enough games. And being 17, 18-year-old senior in high school, right, I didn't understand that. And to be quite honest, I was angry at God. I really was. And I was sitting here in my mind, I was saying, here's my dad using his platform, right, to really, he would coach games on Saturday, and then on Sunday, he'd be speaking at these big events, these Christian events, sharing his testimony. And for me at 17 and 18 years old, I couldn't understand, why are these other coaches that are living a very worldly life, why are they being rewarded? And here's my dad, not having success, right? And I was angry. And that could have been a turning point in my walk with Christ, quite honestly, right? But fortunately for me, I had the father that I have. And the night before he got let go, he called my brother and I back to his bedroom, told us what was getting ready to happen the next day, and he read to us what has now become my life verse, Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future. And in full transparency, when he said that, I wasn't in an attitude to hear that the right way. I kind of thought, well, that's what you do when you lose or something doesn't go your way. You kind of read that to make yourself feel better. Just being honest, that's where I was at that point. 3 days later, completely out of the blue, right, my dad gets a call from Tommy Bowden, who had just got hired at Clemson. There was a connection because of the Bowdens in Florida State. My dad gets hired at Clemson. And then Coach Bowden asked me if I wanted to walk on. I was actually headed to Furman to play quarterback, but Tommy Bowden gave me an opportunity to walk on at Clemson. I go to Clemson, meet my wife Sarah there, and then the next 20 years, everything that's blessed our family at Clemson. And I look back now and say, who are we and who was I at 17 years old to think that I had the best plan for our family's life, right? And it doesn't make it easier, right? I'm obviously just got let go at South Florida last year after a tough season. It doesn't make those easier, but you know what it does? When you've been through it, you have that trust and that faith that the Lord has a better plan out there. And so I know for me, that was a big moment for me as a young person to not only see, I've heard my dad speak at plenty of FCA and church events, but to see him walk it out in the toughest times, those are the things that really, I think, shaped who I am and who I'm striving to be every day. So I went to Clemson, walked on there, majored in secondary ed math. Sarah and I got married as soon as we graduated and got my teaching certificate and moved down to Columbia, came to Ridgeview High School. And all excited, young, 22 years old, was at Ridgeview. I was teaching math. Your first year teachers, they give you the challenging classes. And I don't mean as in hard like calculus. I mean like Math Tech 1, where nobody shows up with a pencil or notebook or anything. And but I loved it. I loved it. I had my class and it was coaching football and baseball as an assistant. And then in my second year, I get a knock on my door. I was in portable P26 out in the back, because that's also where they put the first-year teachers, and there was a brand new high school that was coming, Blythewood High School. It was the talk of the town. $50 million, and this may not be true, but this is what I remember. $50 million high school, $5 million football stadium. Everybody at Ridgeview is talking about, man, we want to go over to Blythewood. As a 23-year-old, assistant coach, I was hoping that whoever they hired at Blythewood would hire me to be on their staff so I could coach in the new stadium and be a part of the new school, right? Well, Dr. Sharon Budden, who is here tonight, she was the principal at Ridgeview, that started Ridgeview. She came by and told me that she was going to be the new principal at Blythewood High School, and she told me that she wanted me to interview for the head coaching position. Now, at that point, I'm glad that she could not hear what went through my head, which is, are you crazy? I'm 23 years old. I don't know what I'm doing with these ninth graders over here. How am I going to handle a varsity football team? But instead I said, yes, ma'am, I'd love to interview. And I did. And there was over 100 applicants. Her and the first athletic director, Vince Lowry, interviewed, went through. I think there was maybe 10 coaches that had won state championships at different schools. And they go through the process, and Dr. Budden chose me to be the first coach. And, that was special. I think it's always in your profession, wherever you are, it takes that first person outside of your family that really kind of sees something special in you, right, to give you that first start. And for me, that's what Dr. Budden was for me. And so much, in fact, she told me that I was going to get the job one afternoon about 1 o'clock, and then she called me about 10 o'clock that same night and said, hold up, it's not a big deal, but the Richland School Board did not approve you because you're so young. But she said she'd been in the district so long, she was going to use some of her brownie points and appeal, and she did, and so 2 weeks later. But that's how strongly she felt about me getting that opportunity. And I'll stand up here now. I just finished this past year was my 20th year in coaching, and obviously been very blessed being there at Clemson with Coach Sweeney on an incredible run and having the opportunity to be a Division I head coach. All right, but I was telling somebody earlier today, I felt like I had my dessert first, right? Normally you're supposed to have your salad, your main course, and then your dessert. In my coaching career, I felt like I got to have that dessert first, right there at Blythewood, and then the main course, and then South Florida was kind of that salad that I don't really like. So that's just kind of, in my mind, how all that worked. But anyways, we get to Blythewood, and I vividly remember telling Dr. Budden in the hallway one day, she said, how's it going? I said, I feel like I'm doing 2 full-time jobs at once. And she said, yes, that's what it's going to be like for a while. And I had a full load of teaching math, and here I am with our football team. We pretty much only had 9th and 10th graders. We had a couple of juniors. So our first year, we just had a JV season. So we're going through that. And I mean, I'm literally just every night, just fall asleep as soon as my head hits the pillow. I mean, I'm just worn out completely. And there's this FCA guy, all right, Carol Baker. Where are you, Carol? All right, stand up, Carol. All right, right there. All right. So Carol would come by the school, right? We're a new school. We don't quite have a FCA going yet. And he would be there, and just he knew my background, obviously being around FCA, and he'd come by there to support me and encourage me and our coaches. And then he'd always kind of say, and I'm in the middle of everything going on, and I'd kind of, yes, sir. And he'd say, I really think you need to start thinking about starting an FCA huddle right here at Blythewood. And I'd go, oh, yes, sir. Well, I'm really busy right now. And every time he'd come, I'd give him a different excuse. Well, we're a public school, and it's a little bit harder in a public school with everything that's going on. So this is going on for about 3 or 4 months. And really, I remember it about January, and this is where our stories kind of diverge a little bit. But what I remember is him kind of forcefully getting me up against the wall a little bit. I think we talked about it earlier today before dinner. We kind of agreed in the middle that he just had a strong grip on my arm. But really what his message was to me, I needed to hear. He said, Jeff, he says, the Lord has you here for a reason. He's given you this platform, and you need to use it. And I needed to hear that because I was so busy doing what I thought I was supposed to be doing, being the best math teacher and being the best coach and trying to do all this stuff. And, it really got me. And I spent some time and prayed about it, talked to my wife about it, and Amy and Crystal were a part of of helping us get started. I talked to Dr. Budden and got her permission and approval to get started with an FCA huddle right there. And we decided we're going to start it right there in the weight room. So we were lifting weights 4 days a week. This is the spring of our first year. We're lifting weights Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, about an hour and a half. So I decided on Wednesday, we're going to cut it down to an hour, to keep everything with the rules. All the players had to leave the weight room, and then they would come back for FCA. And many of them for the first FCA, they didn't know what FCA stood for. And that's really when it got me, is here I am. I grew up in this, and I've coached these guys. Many of the guys I coached at Ridgeview before they got to Blythewood, I've coached these guys for 2 years, and they don't even know what FCA stands for. And I remember talking with Carol about, how do you have the first FCA meeting? What's the first one like? And, he gave me some ideas. But really, God put it on my heart. I hope I don't get in trouble. I'm not working there anymore. But God put it on my heart to honestly share my testimony and share the gospel. And because that's where I felt like I had to start. And so we did. My wife brought pizza, which I think probably helped. And we had some music playing and brought the guys in for the first meeting. And I think just about everybody came. And I shared the gospel from beginning to end. I shared my testimony and my life. And then I passed around a sheet of paper and a pen to every player and asked them just to write me a letter. You can tell me whatever you want to tell me. Just write me a letter. And, let me know basically what can I pray for you about. And I went home that night, and Sarah and I sat at the kitchen table, started reading those letters. And that's when I figured out why I was at Blythewood. One letter in particular, I've always kept this with me. It said, Coach Scott, I want you to know that I consider you like a father, right? That's what a lot of coaches are considered, father figures. Or a mother figure for a female coach in female sport. My real father has been in prison my whole life, and I will never see him outside of the prison because he's in for life. No one in my family is too big on going to church or this God stuff, but the way that you talked about it tonight, I'm interested, and I want to know if you'll please pray for me. Man, you talk about as a coach, right, reading that. See, those are the things that are happening behind the scenes, right? We can get on social media and we can see all the craziness, because it is crazy, the craziness that's going on out there, right? But it's people that come to meetings like tonight that give support for these staff members that are going out on Monday mornings into these schools and really, sharing the word of Christ with people that need it so bad. I was at church this Sunday, and our pastor was reading about a study that just came out that said 79% of kids around the country from 10 years old to 18 say that they're lonely, they're alone, and they're lost and don't have one real connection in their life. Are you kidding me? 80%? We got social media. We're supposed to be the most connected, right? Connected generation ever. But we're alone, right? How many of these students are out there that need that coach or that staff member to come by, right, and support them? So, we got that going, and then Carol told us, and Matt mentioned that, we had the FCA State Conference at Garden City. That was the first FCA event that we got to go to, and later on we took the whole team to some of them that Matt was talking about, but this first one, you had to be able to pay $50 to go to, and it was at Garden City, and so we put a sign-up sheet. I think Amy and Crystal helped us with that, and we were going. We had about 20 players that signed up, but there was about 10 players that wanted to go, but they couldn't afford the $50. I mean, and that's a real deal. As a high school coach, you got some that can't have trouble with the $25 for their physical. So $50 for a weekend was a lot. So we talked to Carol, and he said, the Midlands FCA, our supporters would like to sponsor those 10 young men to be able to go to this conference. So we loaded up and got on the buses, head down to Garden City. I was a little nervous, had no idea what to kind of expect. The first night, our guys are just kind of sitting there listening to the music, not really engaged. And, by the second night, they're right up there on stage dancing and singing and having a great time. But something amazing happened the last night that we were there. As they were getting to hear, other people share their testimony and the gospel. And 14 of the 30 players that went, 14 of the 30 went forward to accept Christ in their life. And I can just remember as a coach watching your players, right, go forward to accept Christ and truly, join the only team that really matters, right? Man, that is a humbling experience. But there was one player that I'd really been praying for that I knew was going through a lot of things, and I knew the Lord was really working on him. And he was not one of the 14 that went forward. And so I remember, and that was kind of the last night. We were going to leave the next morning. And so I was very excited about the 14 guys that did. But you had that one that you just kind of were hoping that maybe he would be that guy to go forward. But it wasn't the Lord's timing. And I remember praying for him that night. And then at about 1 a.m., first of all, I don't know if any of you, hopefully this motel's gone by now. That was about 20 years ago. But there was this bad motel that we were staying in. The coaches were, the players were in, students were in a different building, but the players were in this bad motel. It was across the only light there in Garden City and Sam's Hot Dogs. But at 1 a.m., we get this knock on the door, and my defensive coordinator was in my room, so I said, "Reuben, go get it, protect me." And he opens the door, and it's that player, right, that I was talking about. And he said, "Coach," he said, "I've been thinking about this all night, and I want to pray to accept Christ, and I want to know if you'll lead me in that prayer." Wow, right? So that's where people, they may see coach, right? And you get up there and you're on ESPN or national championship stages. I've got 2 national championship rings, and honestly, I can't even tell you where they are right now. We're in the middle of a move. I don't even know where they are. But this thing right here, and the other players that I was able to be a part of watching them, their spiritual journey that I coached at Clemson, and that's real, and that's powerful, right? But here's what I want you to know. Those moments, right, those aren't all over social media. You're not going to read about that in the paper. You're not going to see that on ESPN, right? But those moments happen because of nights like tonight. Those moments happen because of supporters like yourself, because many of those young men that were the ones to go forward were the same ones that had to get the scholarship to be able to go, right? So on the way back, right, in the bus, all I could think about is, what if Carroll would have stopped the 5th time that he came by the school to tell me to start an FCA, and I kept telling him I was too busy? How could that have changed so many people's life? What would have happened if people stopped giving to FCA? There's a lot of things competing for our money. What if people would have stopped giving and they didn't have that extra money to scholarship these extra 10 students from Blythewood to be able to go to this retreat, right? It's those things that are done that are why we're here tonight. And the other thing that was really powerful, Richard was a big part of that group that led our FCA. They got back from Garden City, and they got with Amy and Crystal, myself, and they said, "We want to open the FCA up to all the students, the whole student body. You want to talk about seeing a school change and an FCA grow strong? You let that football group or those sports teams or whoever, some of the most influential students in your school, let them be the leaders of your FCA." That's how it changes right there. So that was awesome to watch. Our next year was our first varsity season. So we just finished our JV season. We went 10-0 on Thursday night, and we thought we were hot stuff, right? So our first varsity game, we're going to play Ridgeview. Now, you can imagine Ridgeview, those players and coaches weren't very happy that they got left behind at Ridgeview. We all got the new uniforms, the new stadium, all that stuff. None of our players at Blythewood had ever played in a varsity game. And so we played as hard as we could, and we lost by 7 points. We're 0-1. And I can remember that Monday morning I think it was Mel came up. Dr. Budden's administrative assistant came to my room. Now, I was actually in the school now at Blythewood. I wasn't in a portable. She said, "Excuse me, Dr. Budden would like to see you." So what does all my students do? Ooh. I mean, like right now, she's like, "Yeah, I'm going to watch your class." I'm like, "Okay." This is Monday morning after we lost to Ridgeview in our first varsity game. So I go down there to see Dr. Budden, and she said, "Have a seat." And she's sitting up with her pencil and notebook. I'm like, "Okay, here we go." She said, "I just want to review the game from Friday night." I was like, "Okay." And she said, "Do you think after doing all your reviews that maybe, you guys gave up on the run a little bit early?" I said, well, okay. Well, here's what happened. They were in a 3-4 defense and, this, that, and the other. And she said, looking back on it, do you think maybe you should have blitzed a little bit more there in the second half? I'm going, where is she getting these questions? I'm going, is you reading this? So finally, I stopped her about halfway in. I said, Dr. Budden, can I ask you a question? She said, yeah. Yes, Jeff. I said, do you like me? She said, yes, I like you. I said, no, do you really like me? She said, yes, I really like you. I said, well, if we don't have a winning season this year, are you still going to like me? She said, of course I'm still going to like you, but we sure will miss you around here. So that's all I needed to hear from that point on. And it might not have been in those words, but I felt it across the table. So, no, it was incredible. The next week, we played Fairfield Central, got our first varsity win against Fairfield Central. The next week, we upset Richland Northeast. They had just played in the state championship the year before, and they had 4 D1s, and we ran a double reverse pass for a touchdown, and boy, here we go. And we went on a miraculous season, to be honest. I actually brought it up this year when it was getting tough at South Florida, and we couldn't get a break. And I said, you guys don't know anything about Blythewood High School, but many years ago, I was in a season, and there was 10 key moments throughout that season, and all 10 went our way. And I said, I feel like the football gods are evening out the score this year because they're all going the other way. But it was a special year, and we won the state championship on a last-second field goal. And one of my highlights was being able to give Dr. Budden that game ball right there at Williams-Brice Stadium. And, just absolutely incredible. One other funny story I just got to tell because it's too good. The superintendent at the time, we were the first school in Richland County to win a state championship in football in 21 years. It's kind of a big deal. So the superintendent comes by that night, and he's giving out the medals. And Coach Scott, thank you so much. Great job. I mean, it's 11 o'clock at night. He pulls out of his vest right there, and he said, on behalf of the Richland School District 2 board, this is a token of our appreciation. I said, thank you so much. I put it in there. So I get home like 4 hours later. It's 3 a.m. I got Gatorade still on me, all that. I pull out the envelope, and I'm like, this is about to be a $500 check, right? This is going to be good. I hope, and this is a true story out of all the ones I've been telling. I open it up, and it was a $20 gift card to Chili's. That is a true story. And I told my wife, baby, we've made it. This is the big time. I'm not going to be able to buy your meal, but I can buy your appetizer right there. But that was such a fun time. And, I tell people all the time, I asked my dad after that state championship season, I said, what should I do now, right? And he says, leave before they figure out you're not really that good of a coach. And so I did. I went to Presbyterian and my first college job, and then I got on to Clemson, and really the Lord just kind of lined that whole thing up. Getting to Clemson, I got there 6 months before Coach Sweeney took over as the interim head coach. I was just kind of the guy that was sitting in the seat, and he said, hey, why don't you go coach Whitehouse, right? And just right place, the right time. The good Lord lined that up. And to be able to be there for 12 years with Coach Sweeney and watch him and his heart for our players and for them, right, learning who Jesus Christ is was just an absolute joy of my career and a great time. But, I want to close with one final story that I think really kind of sets where we are. And this one is another true one, so I'll have to give some disclaimers. But whenever I was a young kid, I was 8 years old. I got one brother, John. He's 3 years younger than me. John was 5 years old, okay? And we were down in Florida with some of our family, and we were camping. This is like Thanksgiving. We're camping out in the middle of the woods. I mean, when I say middle of the woods, it's like, 5 miles from the hard road to get into where these woods are, that we're in central Florida, not any of the coast. And, it's me and my brother, my dad, my granddad, my uncles, my cousins. And so I had 2 older cousins, Matt and Lewis. Now, they're 15, 16 years old. So they get me and my brother one night, and they say, hey, again, I'm 8, my brother's 5. They say, hey, come here. We kind of go over there and say, y'all ever heard of snipe hunting? And we're like, no. And they're like, well, I'm going to take you snipe hunting. I'm like, okay, what's that? And they're like, all right, go get a flashlight and a pillowcase. So we run to our little cabin, get a flashlight and pillowcase. We're like, all right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to sneak away from camp here in about 10 minutes. We're going to ride out there. We're going to get in this canopy of trees. Again, this is 100% true story. We're going to get in this canopy of trees, and you guys you're going to get on your right knee. You're going to hold your flashlight in your right hand, and you're going to have your pillowcase in the left hand, and you're going to whistle, and then you're going to swing the flashlight around. Or to an 8-year-old and 5-year-old, like, all right, cool, right? And the birds are going to follow the light, and when you see them follow in the light, you're going to move it into the pillowcase, and then you trap them. We're like, all right, let's do it, right? So we did. So we literally got in a Jeep. We snuck out. We go about a mile, away. Some of you guys that have been snipe hunting probably remember this. And so we get there, and it's me and my brother. True story. We're out here and on one knee doing this whole deal, and Matt and Lewis are on the other side of this canopy of trees, and I don't know how, but there truly were birds up there. I don't know how this part worked, but they weren't following the flashlight. But I heard my cousin, he'd say, hey, got one. The other say, hey, I got one too, and we're like, okay. Y'all need to whistle a little louder, so we're whistling. And about that time, we realized our flashlights go out, and we're the only ones there. Matt and Lewis aren't there anymore. So we look at each other, and you want to talk about dark. Get out in the middle of the woods. That's dark, right? And all of a sudden, about that time, we hear behind us something that sounds like a bobcat, a boar hog, and a bear wrestling each other in the palmettos. And so we just take off running, and we're crying, screaming, literally like just freaked out. I still to this day cannot believe that they did this to us. And we're freaking out. And just, hollering and screaming and yelling, and it's just all here. And we run to where the Jeep was. The Jeep's gone. And my brother, all of a sudden, he's about to hyperventilate. He starts pulling on my sleeve, and he couldn't even talk. I got down there like, what is it? And he points, right? And sure enough, right, in that dark, dark, dark woods, you could see just a flicker of light. And you know what that was? That was the campfire. We took off running for that campfire because we knew that's where safety is. That's where our dad is, our granddad. That's where camp is. Right? And we ran back. We feel like people are chasing us and all that. We get there, and, of course, for several years, that was just a funny story. And that truly did happen. That was just a funny story, and, we kind of got you and all that. But, as I grew and got a little bit older and started thinking, I said, you know what? I came across this verse, and I said, this is where we are as Christians. We're all walking around in a dark place. I think everybody would agree that where we are right now, it's a dark world out there. It's dark. There's a lot of people searching in the dark. But God has called us to be a light in the darkness, a light for Him. Matthew 5:14-16, as I close, says, you are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a basket. Instead, they put it on a stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. And that's what we're called to do. We're called to be that light, to let Christ, as Christians, let His light shine in us, right? And man, it's a dark place. The world, it's always been sinful, right? But man, it's just right now, I feel like I'm getting older because it's kind of like, boy, this generation and all that stuff, but it's dark more than ever. That story that I told you all about Blythewood High School, right, that was 2006, right, whatever that is, 17 years ago, right? And today, those same students throughout all these counties in the Midlands, right, they need coaches, FCA staff members that are providing them with opportunities, right, to see Christ. Right, and that's why we're here, right? That's why my wife and I personally, right, are very strong contributors to FCA and have been for many years because we've seen personally in our own life, right, the impact that FCA can have and the vehicle that how it can change, people's life. And so, my final thing that I'm up here, I was a recruiter back in the day, and so I've been challenged to kind of give that ask, right? And David's going to come up here in just a minute and give those instructions. But there's a lot of things competing for our money, right? There's no doubt about it, all right? And you have to make decisions, right? And I want everybody to do one thing. This is one thing I did with our players whenever I was there at Clemson and with our offense. I'm going to give you some instructions. They're very easy instructions, all right, but I want you to follow through, and I promise you I'm going to sit down, all right, and let you guys get out of here. I won't hold you hostage any longer, all right, but you got to follow my instructions exactly right. So here it is, all right. I want everybody to raise your right hand as high as you can, all right, right hand high as you can, all right. Now I want everybody to raise a little higher. Y'all see that? All right, one more time, a little higher. See that? All right, put your hand down, all right? And you know what I used to tell our players? For us to go from good to great, it's that little bit extra, right? Everybody's doing this. There's probably anti-Christian groups that are putting money together to go spew bad, sinful stuff that our kids are reading and seeing, right? Everybody's doing this, right? The difference is in that little bit more. That little bit more, that's the difference, right? That little bit more may be that young man or young woman, right, that's going to get an opportunity because of the staff here and because of the coaches they mentor and because of the camps that are offered that may come to know Christ. So I just want to challenge you and where you are to think about, give a little bit more this year. All right, do a little bit more. Everybody knows where you are and what you can do, but I know I've challenged myself, my wife and I, to do a little bit more in that. And thank you so much for what you do. Thank you for the commitment that you've made to this community. And I know personally, I've got a 7-year-old and a 3-year-old that are going to be coming through the schools in South Carolina. I sure hope there's people in that FCA group up there in the upstate that are having meetings like this to be able to raise money so that my children and their classmates have that same opportunity to be a part of this if they choose to. Thank you so much. God bless, and I'm going to bring David up.